quiet Greek island that boasts of fertility, enclosed by the Mediterranean. Surrounded by sea, it separates Europe from the African continent, therefore acting as the natural border and intersection of two quite different collective identities and cultures, the European from the Middle Eastern. This place, my home, is Crete. Reflecting on my life as a 21-year-old university graduate, I see in it the intersection of three themes that have shaped my path. These three themes, mobility, identity, and gender, are the topics of my speech today. Mobility has been an entire way of life for me since my childhood. It shaped my mentality, my choices, and my expectations. I got used to moving since I was a kid, so the first time I had to move out from Crete was when my parents got divorced. This is when I moved to Athens with my mother, and I was enrolled at a French Catholic school. Strict and conservative, filled with nuns with gray scarves, they taught me perfect French and the necessity of savoir-faire. In other words, how to behave well in a socially acceptable manner. I was undoubtedly the perfect fit for the sterile knowledge of the Greek education system. You see, I was easily memorizing stuff. At high school, I decided I had to make a move again. So I informed my teachers that I would quit, I would not go through the national exams, and I would prepare to study abroad. This was during the beginning of the crisis in Greece, in 2009. Everybody thought I was crazy, both me and my parents, of course. Despite what everybody thought and said, there was a voice inside me screaming that I had to overcome all barriers and go abroad for my studies. This led me to choose the private international baccalaureate school, Athens College, polar opposite of every education system I have experienced up to that day. The courses were completely in English, some people thought I had some weird connection with Paris, and needless to say that an entire classroom burst out laughing when I pronounced Christ with such a Frenchy accent. In other words, I was going through the first serious identity shock of my life. Fortunately, I survived the 2 years of the program, and I was successfully admitted to study economics in London. I stayed in the royal and reigning United Kingdom for 3 years, I took my degree, and the next step could easily be settling down there. Instead, I chose to challenge the mainstream path and book a ticket for the South. You know, the South has always been attractive to me. Vuelvo al sur, as you say in Spanish. And so, I landed in Buenos Aires. If you ask me what defines my life up to now, I would say mobility. This is exactly the characteristic that makes it no different than many other young individuals of our generation, perhaps many of you. I got used to moving since I was a kid. By moving, meaning leaving something behind, while having something awaiting ahead of me. In fact, we're all part of a generation which is usually referred to in terms of flows. Immigration flows, student flows, worker flows. And wherever there is mobility, what naturally lies ahead is adaptation. Popular wisdom says that the way you treat failure shows your personality. I would say that the way you adapt to new circumstances and new environments shows your identity. We're blessed to live during an era when mobility is democratized, when the young soul portrays the flaneur spirit, the wanderlust, the quest for self-discovery. You might rationally think that mobility is a privilege. And look, even me now on stage, I represent the minority who has had the ability to cross the entire Atlantic for 17 hours at a comfortable airline seat just to explore the world. I acknowledge that there are barriers to being mobile, social, economic, political, and so forth. I could give you a convincing theoretical explanation from my science, economics, of how to overcome these barriers on the micro or macro level, but I'm sure you've had enough of theories, coefficients, predicting impacts, and statistics. I risk sounding like a grandma now, but I'll speak from experience. In every corner of the planet I had the chance to step on, I met young people my age whose paths provided me with beautiful stories about the inspiration of being mobile. people who are indeed the inspiration of my talk. More specifically, I met people who study abroad with 4 scholarships from their home as well as host country. Students who crowdfunded to attend international conferences or pitch for their startup abroad. Young talents who appeal to wealthy individuals and foundations for research grants, and even people whose governments fund them to represent them in the international community. Young hearts who left their corporate jobs to volunteer with orphans or prostitutes, or even crossed half of the planet to save little turtle eggs. I'm not fooled to believe that money does not facilitate traveling. Money being the crude way of what we delicately mean by resources in economics. But equally, I cannot ignore one key trait in all these individuals: persistence. Therefore, I'm advocating today that mobility is not a privilege, but an opportunity to be taken. So, how does mobility enable us to build up our unique identity? At any point in time where this exclusive combination of influences of our environment, a mixture of moments experienced and stimuli received. Imagine our identity at any present time as the synthesis of all our cumulative experiences of the past. As with any economic model, which starts with assumptions, when we're born, we're automatically given some features to start with. In my case, I was born as a Greek Christian Orthodox girl. Thus, my initial identity was more or less assigned to me, and I can confidently say that during our baby years, this identity is quite static. In fact, only an approximation of what we will become later in the future. Nevertheless, our lifetime identity capital is nothing but static. To the contrary, it is actively dynamic. Dynamic forces, including variability, periodical movements, and changes. Does it sound like jargon an economist would use? Well, in real life, all these describe the same very simple word: change. We're continuously enriching our identities through a dynamic contextual framework, through everyday change. And wherever we move, we carry this identity with us. It feels quite liberating saying this today. Why? 2 months ago, I returned to London after a wonderful trip to Asia. My house contract in London was ending in a few days, and along with this, I was ending up with 15 boxes with all my stuff packed in bubble wrap, ranging from forks and knives to travel souvenirs. And honestly, I had no clue what to do with them. In a state of uncertainty and despair, I called my mom in Greece, and I had a small drama queen show on the phone. Up to the moment, she yelled at me these few words that struck me. You're letting 15 carton boxes define who you are. You have the impression you need all this to be happy, although you can survive with none of them. Ship them back here, take a suitcase, and go wherever you feel like going. This is what I did. The same day, the courier company took all of them. That night, I stayed in the middle of the empty house, and I realized that what I was carrying inside me was more than enough. A newly refined identity of an individual who went to London as a teenager and left as a young woman and young professional. I turned 21 a few months ago. Being in your early 20s usually goes hand in hand with having no worries, no fears, and no regrets. This is the period in your life when you have plenty of time for carrying out activities out of the job market, like traveling, but low earning potential to finance them. In other words, you have time and energy, but no constant inflow of income. This is one of the most common trade-offs in economic theory, and I would say one of the various trade-offs we face as young individuals. But are we really worry-free at this age? We graduate from university and we're immediately expected to land into a graduate job to kickstart our career. At a time when admittedly most young employees are handpicked from their internships, we're even expected to work during the summer of our university years. We devote time to construct the perfect online image, to have a well-polished LinkedIn profile, and be extra cautious with Facebook because, as I've heard 100 times, recruiters do check your Facebook profile. Our identities are placed in frames since our student years, frames in which we're expected to adapt. Often people have a business card since a very young age, while if you want to work for a big multinational firm, you need to take tons of psychometric tests to be hired. Tests that check your value system and the way you take decisions. Isn't this another example that our identity is constantly investigated? I'm definitely the wrong person to give you advice on the job market. Why? Because I will discover it with many of you in the years to come. There are, however, two thoughts I would like to share with you. Thoughts from advice people have given me and I'm trying to incorporate in my own life. The first thing I urge you to do is to think of who you are today and whom you do not want to become in the future. It should not just be your skills that match the job, but probably more important is to find a job matching your identity. A job tailored to your talents, your creativity, and most of all, the aspiration you have of yourself. Make your day start at 8 or 9 in the morning when you enter the door of your job and not when you go out of it. My second thought relates to role models. We have an inner need to find people to admire and respect. Personalities whose path in life, their successes and failures, brighten up the aspirations we have for our own selves. With information so readily available, it is relatively easy to idolize people far away from us, from poets to politicians and scientists to artists. Have you ever thought, though, that the most wonderful role models might be in very close proximity to you? The person sitting right next to you, your family or your friends, the very same people who influence your identity. I'm blessed to have two amazing parents to remind me of this. I'll shortly tell you why. Both of my parents were admitted at one of the top business schools of Greece in 1984. Both coming from families into commerce, they were more or less forced to study business administration. However, they soon met, and following this, they quit university and they started up their own business. In other words, they started earning their own money, they settled down, and in their late 20s, they had me. 25 years after they quit, both of my parents decided to turn back time and go finish their undergraduate degree. If you ask them, this has been the best experience of their lives. If you ask me, this has been the funniest phase of my life, seeing them exchanging class notes and discussing with so much anxiety which topic will appear at the exam. In fact, I even graduated earlier than them this July, while they both graduate from their masters in a few months. The reason I told you this story is because my parents' decision placed them at the very center of this microcosm of little heroes I have built around me and from which I draw inspiration. Other than that, their story has a clear message. It's never late to embark on a journey that will make your identity stronger and richer. I left the most obvious part of my identity for the end. How it feels being a 21-year-old woman. Well, if you want an honest answer, it makes me feel resourceful, agile, and confident. You might expect me to engage in common rhetoric, such as that sexism cuts women's wings while feminism strengthens them. Believe it or not, economics has immensely helped me to face these issues with rationality rather than sensitivity, to place women in a comparative framework, to face gender inequality as an aggregate phenomenon to be tackled rather than pure injustice. Maybe you think I'm too naive to think this way, but this approach makes me believe that sooner or later humanity will develop the tools to solve gender inequality through policy making rather than wonderful speeches on how unfair the world has been to women. On a more personal note, if you follow my belief that what defines you is your identity, does it really matter whether sexism exists or what the term feminism really means? To be frank with you, I come from a very female-centered family. something that definitely obscures my view on gender stereotypes. I'm used in seeing women at the top of the hierarchy, having a high earning potential, and having a determinant role in family decision making. Certainly a privilege offered to me from the countries I've lived in, Greece and the UK. It is clear then that your childhood experiences, as well as the overall tendency in the country you live in, influence the way you treat the balance of powers between the two genders. Growing older might soon prove me that I'm in a state of daydreaming. But for the moment, I stay firm in my belief that if you have a robust identity, people can see an entire universe behind your long, impressive hair, your high heels, or your feminine voice. Talking to the female audience here today, treat your femininity as an asset to your identity and not as a barrier. I would like to finish my speech urging you to take a step back from your routine, your job, and your studies, and self-reflect on your identity. Treat your identity like a white canvas which your life will gradually convert into a piece of art. You're the painter of it, so you choose the colors you want to use. Nobody expects you to produce a masterpiece, but something representative of yourself. You will come across many different phases in your life. Some will be black and white, others will be colorful. But no matter what, this is going to be your creation. Go out of your comfort zone, stay alone, learn how to enjoy solitude, move. Because only by moving, you can discover new color shades, new patterns of painting your identity, new paths to follow, and new ways to evolve. Treat your identity as your brand in life, your reference point. In the words of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, human beings are not born once and for all the days their mothers give birth to them, but life obliges them over and over again to give birth to themselves. Give birth to your brand. Give birth to the identity that would make you proud of having. Thank you very much.